China recently passed the Foreign Relations Law, which lays out foreign policy with an aim to multipolarity. That means that no foreign policy must yield to a foreign power or aim to exert power. The West is freaking out about this in Western press. They're calling it anti business. They're saying that it could even lead to military conflict. Here to discuss it is podcaster Carl Za. He's the host of the Silk and Steel podcast that focuses on China, history, culture, and politics. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi, Natalie. Thanks for inviting me.
Yes, of course. So, at a high level, can you explain the foreign relations law and why the West is finding it so upsetting?
Okay, so all the news outlets reporting this as somehow Xi Jinping further consolidate his grip on power, which is ridiculous because Xi Jinping doesn't need to consolidate his power anymore. That was done when during the last party congress when he was confirmed for presidency for the next 5 years. Now, what the foreign relation law is designed to do, according to the Chinese official themselves, is to counter some of the U.S. sanctions that has recently been levied against China, particularly in the high-tech sectors. As we know, starting from Trump administration, but continue under Biden administration, now there's U.S. is waging a chip war against China. There's restriction on advanced semiconductor export to China, not just U.S. company, but companies worldwide. So companies in South Korea, Taiwan, and Netherlands are prohibited under U.S. law from exporting advanced semiconductors to China. So this is a global ban. It's not just U.S. companies. So basically, any companies that have any kind of business with United States, essentially any companies that deals with U.S. dollars will have to comply with the U.S. sanctions. And um, in and I'm sure people have heard just recently, China rolled out a counter sanction. Now China is placing restriction on rare earth elements that's that's exported to make the advanced semiconductor
Yeah,
chips.
which
So
the West
so
doesn't
China
have.
yeah, well, so the West do have the rare earth mineral resources, but they chose not to develop them. So in the last 20
Right.
years,
Or if they
China
are developing them, they're being litigated by environmentalists, so they can't. So, yeah,
exactly,
they have no
exactly,
options. You're right.
exactly. And you will take. I mean, if the West chose to, they can bring the rare earth mine back online, but that will take like 5 to 10 years.
Yes.
That's just how long it will take to bring a mine back up online. And meanwhile, China still controls somewhere between 90% of the rare earth production. So basically, China is saying, look, you don't want to. You want to restrict advanced semiconductor chips to me? Then sorry, I'm going to cut off the minerals that you use to make those chips. And so this is just a further escalation. Now, the foreign relation laws that China rolled out is basically enable China to do exactly that, is to counter the kind of economic lawfare that United States have been waging on China for the past 5 6 years. That's what it's designed to do. And what some other thing that it's designed to do is codify some of the principles of the Chinese foreign policy. For example, the five principle of peaceful coexistence, which has been the cornerstone of the Chinese foreign policy since 1953, when it was first proposed by then Premier Zhou Enlai. And the five principles of peaceful coexistence are mutual respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity, mutual non-aggression, non-interference in each other's internal affairs, equality and mutual benefits, and peaceful coexistence. So now it's been codified into law. And if people actually read what each article says under the new Chinese foreign policy law that's been rolled out, it says respect the UN Charter. You
Right.
respect the UN Charter. So I mean, like, I don't know how they can spin this as somehow like just Xi Jinping consolidating power. It's just ridiculous.
Well, the way that CNBC has spun it is that this is anti business. and businesses are worried they'll be forced to hand over data or can't work internationally. I don't completely understand that argument. Do you?
So this is basically okay. So right now there is a global wide concern about data security.
Yes.
United States, each country is requiring uh, the data the companies, that these global companies collect on their citizens to be stored on servers inside their country. U.S. does it, China does it, everyone everyone do it. Well, the so-called concern that they have to force to hand over data is kind of facetious. This is what every sovereign government require right now. Both Europe, U.S., and China, and China do have a policy requiring multinationals who do business in China to do some kind of tech transfer. Has been the biggest complaint by the Western multinationals. But again, this is China exerting it's exercising sovereignty, right? If you want to come into
Yeah.
China, do business, you want to access the vast Chinese market or the Chinese labor force, you need to comply to the Chinese laws, which says you need to do tech transfer so these skills can be transferred to local forces. The local Chinese people will be trained, and the Chinese industry can climb that tech tree. This is what U.S. government is against. This is behind the U.S. This is the logic of U.S. sanction. U.S. sanction, it says it's okay. China can assemble our iPhones for us, but they're not allowed to advance the tech tree. They're not allowed to gain. They're not allowed to gain advancement in advanced semiconductors that threaten our hegemony in the tech space. That's basically what the whole U.S. Tech war against China is all about.
So it seems that this is a response to U.S. policy, and U.S. policy, they don't like it. And then just a day before this law went into effect, on June 30th, the U.S. issued a State Department issued a warning to Americans not to travel to China. Do you think those two things are related?
Um, Possibly. U.S. State Department issue outrageous warning all the time. They also issue a travel warning on Russia. It warns
Yes.
U.S. citizens not to travel on Russia. But actually, we're not. U.S. passport holder is not banned from travel to Russia. They just tell you not to do it. As long as you can get a Russia visa uh, from the Russian consulate, you can travel. I just came back from Moscow, so as a U.S. passport holder, there's no problem. And
Yes.
same to
It's
China.
it's more of a warning, like we're not going to help you if you get in trouble, and there's a lot of trouble there.
Yeah,
We're just letting you know.
yeah,
One of the
yeah.
things
I would.
that's, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I would travel to China in a heartbeat if opportunity comes up. I don't think there's any danger for any ordinary Americans. If you're not in the employee of intelligence services, you shouldn't have to worry.
Now, one of the things in this law stipulates that China will be leader in environmental and climate governance. That's something the West has been saying they want from China all along, that China won't cooperate when it comes to the environment. They're saying this. So maybe the West doesn't mean it when they ask for climate policy out of China. What do you think of that?
Well, this is weird because China has been the leading builder of the alternative power source. If you look at any matrix, solar power, wind power, hydroelectric, China is way ahead of any country in the West. But China, but people then point out, oh, wait, but China is expanding out its coal power plant. Of course, right now the alternative power source right now they are not stable. They're intermittent, so they require backup. You need, as China roll out this green energy source, they need to expand their coal power plant capacity as backup. So if people look at the actual power that's been generated by sustainable energy source in China, it's way outstrip. What's been produced elsewhere in U.S. or Europe. There's no question about that.
Yes. Yes. And Germany, the United States, they've all had carbon emissions peaks. They were allowed to do that. and then stable out, the idea that China should not be allowed to do that is extremely short sighted. One of the things that you posted about the foreign relations law I was interested in was by a former Pentagon official, Elbridge Colby, saying that this is going to lead to military action, the foreign relations law. This is only diplomatic policy, but he's saying, no, this is going to lead to war. Uh, can you respond to that? Does this make for good fodder for a war for China?
Yeah, I mean, Albridge actually made a specific reference to 1941. For people who don't know, that's the start of the Pacific War. What he's referring to is a time when U.S. applied trade embargo against the Empire of Japan, and at that time, the Imperial Japanese Army depended on oil and steel that's imported from U.S. or European colonies. And when the U.S. embargo was placed on Japan, some historians argue that forced Japan to do Pearl Harbor. And what Albridge is saying, he's saying right now, we are at a position, at a U.S. is in a position to put the economic pinch on China to force them to do something foolish, and then we can basically, bring our boots down, do a replay of Pacific War 2.0. I mean, I think it's crazy, it's misguided, especially when both U.S. and China are nuclear powers. I mean, any kind of hot war could lead to a nuclear escalation. I mean, that's a very dangerous path to go down.
Yes, and I've been thinking a lot lately about how, as a Westerner, I've been warmed up for this war with Russia, with anti Russian sentiment for years now. And now I feel like I am being warmed up for anti Chinese sentiment, even though it's been ratcheting up for years. Just this week, presidential candidate Nikki Haley laid out a fierce anti China policy in a speech saying that, oh, their military is oppressive, it's a police state. This seems to be, again, the anti China rhetoric, and she's taking it up to 11.
I warned about China's growing military power, its growing repression at home and aggression abroad, and its growing challenge to American interests and America itself. I specifically called out its military civil fusion program, where the Chinese Communist Party exploits American companies to strengthen its military. I urged our leaders to, quote, think about China critically, creatively, and courageously. China's police state is more comprehensive. It has destroyed freedom in Hong Kong. It has deepened its genocide of the Uyghurs. It is threatening Taiwan daily. Its no limits alliance with Russia has cemented. And of course, there was COVID.
Can you comment on that before I let you go?
Sure. I mean, Nikki Haley basically running her entire presidential bid on the anti-China platform, and she's not alone actually. So is Vivek Ramaswamy,
Yes.
but if you actually look at their poll numbers, they're in single digits. I mean, there's no hope in hell they will be elected the president of the United States, and yet they're banking on their entire bid on the anti-China rhetoric. So at the same time, I think it's because now anti-China rhetoric has been consensus among the U.S. elite, but at the same time, as much as the U.S. public has been propagandized to accept a hostile relationship with China, I think a lot of those kind of anti-China sentiment is only skin deep, because at the end of the day, average Americans still more concerned about the economy, their jobs, how to provide for their children. China, these warmongers try to convince people that China is somehow existential threat to United States. I don't think people are buying that.
Yeah. But the thing is that it's subtle. It's subtle, and it comes at us, and then all of a sudden, when there is a war, we're all in. That's the kind of thing that scares me, is to be led into something without thinking about it. So I really appreciate your voice on this and explaining this. And I hope you come back on Redacted another time. It was a pleasure to talk to you for the first time.
I would love to. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for watching this segment here at Redacted. We are live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, trying to share the stories that the mainstream media will not cover. You should also come over and join our community of Redacted Rebels over at redacted.inc. That's our private locals community where we can share exclusive content that we simply cannot share here on YouTube. Come over and join the rebellion together right now by going to redacted.inc. We'll see you next time.